This week's poem is called I Love This Game, and it's a three-part series about my three concussions that I had while I was playing football, one in high school, one in college, and then one in the pros. And the last one was my final one, obviously. And so the first part that's coming out this week is about my concussion that I experienced in high school. It was a routine play in which I made a tackle, my head hit my opponent's body, and I felt a pretty regular jar to the head and body area, after which I had no idea where I was. I remember clips of myself trying to get back to the line, and I remember vaguely them scoring. I remember nothing about getting back to the sideline. But as you'll see in the poem, there are moments in which it was pretty terrifying for me not to be able to remember. And I didn't really know that I wasn't remembering. Clearly, I wasn't remembering. But the issue with this particular poem, and as you'll see throughout this series of these poems, and in the title, I Love This Game, was that the reason that I was in that position in the first place was because I had a particular set of skills that allowed me to be on the field. One of those skills is that I had an insatiable drive to win and to succeed, a motor that was very rare. And that allowed me to continue to win and progress in my career, including moving up into a starting position when I was a freshman in college, and then into the pros, which I didn't have as much success there, but still I was able to get to the pros because of this drive to win. So it was that pre-ingrained skill that was a part of my operating system that caused me to, following the concussion, I had to get back on the field as soon as possible. There was no doubt in my mind that the next week against our rival, I had to be on the field, no matter the consequences. And clearly there was a protocol that I had to go through, and I wanted to pass the test just as quickly and as well as I passed every test in class. But no matter what, no matter how I felt, and clearly at the time I was going to say whatever I could to get back on the field. My entire identity was on the field. My friends were playing. It was a rivalry game. And everything I knew, my entire operating system was perfectly designed to be on the field and be a part of that team and be a critical piece of winning that game, which we did not win. But actually, I think we did. I'm not sure about that. It was against a rival. Anyways, so the issue, while a concussion is a serious issue, right? It's a blow to the head. The mind is a precious commodity in which we must take care of, especially for our young kids. I mean, I wrote a tweet back when I posted Backyard Football which is another poem, and it was about how we limit young kids to drinking alcohol until after the age of 21. They can't drive until 16, but we're putting helmets on them and allowing them to tackle one another oftentimes and repetitively experiencing head-to-head collisions. And we attribute this to a part of normal childhood development. And I mean, if I think about that circumstance right now as it is, or if you think about that circumstance as an adult, and if you're reading this as an adult or if you're a child, and you think about putting yourself, a mature brain, in a helmet and going head to head against somebody else who's also trying to harm you, that doesn't seem like a good idea. But of course, as a kid who wants to win, who wants to compete, wants to do what everybody else is doing, and clearly it's normalized in our society, that's not something that registers as a dangerous idea, because it's been normalized. And so when I experienced this hit against another one of our rivals, and actually a friend of mine, it was a normal thing for me to experience that. And so, of course, as soon as that happened, I didn't think, oh, I'm in trouble. I thought, oh, I better get back to the line. So if you think about this is a problem, because it's not that just the concussion that's the issue. It's our desire to ignore such a serious problem that could lead to, and we know leads to, long-term issues long after your career is over. In the short term, it's not like we might be able to recover and get back to baseline from what they from what they can tell on the test. But of course, we're going to do everything we can to pass the test. How easy it is. I mean, not for everybody, but a test given in high school they're pretty easy to complete and to pass. I mean, multiple choice, like you're gonna find a way to get the right answer. There's a mechanism, there's a framework by which the teacher creates the test, and the same goes for this concussion protocol. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but at the same time, you're highly motivated. The point is that you're highly motivated to pass this test. And so from a subjective perspective, you're going to say you're fine. Like, I don't feel anything. I don't feel any issues. When what happened after the concussion is that you have adjusted to the new way of operating, the new life experience, the cognition that is adjusted to what happens after a collision. And so because of that, of course, you're going to say you want to get back on the field because that's become who you are. You want to get back on the field because you love it so much, no matter what the cost. And so in that moment, I was blind, completely blind, and completely, this is a cliche and I hate to use it, but I'm going to use it, completely drunk in love with the sport that I couldn't see beyond that next week. And maybe it didn't impact me as much as other people, and maybe I did fine, but at the same time, I have no idea how that really impacted me, because all we know is what happened afterwards. It's possible that without all of the hits leading up to that particular concussion, which over the course of an entire season, over the course of every year since third grade leading up to that point, and all the hits that accumulate, that impacted me as a person. That impacted my ability to think and process emotions and to navigate the world and to communicate. And so we don't really know the ramifications. We don't really know what could have been had I not experienced those issues. But we know that I got back to the field, and we know that I performed at a fine level. I wouldn't say I did excellent, but I was able to get back and help my team win. And so the issue here is not the concussion. The issue here is that you're willing to ignore the concussion and continue going because you don't think it's a big deal, when really it is a big deal. And as a competitor, as a person who prides himself on being on the field, being the one that goes the extra mile, does more reps, does more than anybody else on the team, in order to get to that position in the first place, I had to be that guy that did more than everybody else, went harder than anybody else. That's why I was who I was. That doesn't go away after an injury, after a concussion, whether it was my knee or my head. It was still whether or not I wanted to be out there. And of course I did. I would do anything to get out there. And I wasn't going to let a concussion get in the way of that. I wasn't going to let a knee injury get in the way of that. That was my pride that said, I'm better than this injury. I'm fine. I don't need to recover. I don't need to rest. I feel fine. But of course, in that state, I'm not thinking clearly. I'm so blinded by the immediate pleasure of wanting to be a part of that team that I couldn't see. It's impossible for me to see what would have happened had I taken the time to rest and recover, and to realize that every single concussion that I took, every single hit that I took, whether or not it was designated as a concussion, wearing helmets then that are now outlawed, which if you think about it, now the helmets that are being used are actually, they are supposed to be better for you, but still players are adding padded turtle shells, which I talk about in the poem, to their helmets for added protection. So we added the helmet in the first place for more protection. Now we're adding even more protection for more protection. It's not the helmet that's the problem. It's our desire to play football. It's our desire to embody this identity that we believe is more real than our real life, because of course playing football is more exciting than real life. It's an artificial war. Of course we're stimulated. Of course we're excited. Of course we want to be on the field. Of course that's the most important thing in our life if we're good. And so for a concussion or any injury to take us out of that would be to lose an identity, especially at such a young age, such as high school, in which you're developing your understanding of who you are, and it's being solidified as a football player, and you have family and friends watching from the sideline, and even college scouts watching from the sideline, and you suffer a concussion during a critical game with another game on the horizon, with another state championship on the horizon. Of course, the concussion is going to be a non-issue. Of course, in my youthful naivety, I did not care that I had suffered a concussion. I did not know. I did not know that. I did not know that players who played in the NFL had committed suicide because of CTE. That wasn't exposed to me then. It was only in 2015 that there was a lawsuit against the NFL about the lack of communication about the long-term neurological effects of concussions, which actually there's a research study that was done in 1934 that talked about punch drunk syndrome, which talks about the long-term neurological effects of repetitive violent head-to-head collisions or punching in boxing. And that was not made aware to me. And honestly, if I was given that information at the time, I would not have had the maturity to understand how that could have affected me over the course of my life. I didn't care. I wasn't worried about what was happening in 40 years. I was worried about what was happening in high school. Because in high school, I was this socially awkward person who was trying to find his mold, find his fit in the world, and I used football as a way to bolster my social identity, because that was the best thing. That was the best thing that I had to lean on. That I thought that I could lean on was football. So how could I not? I wasn't going to let any kind of concussion take me out of that. And so, as you'll see in the next two parts, it's a similar story that happens in each of the successive concussions that I'll talk about, the next week and the week after. And so that is I Love This Game, part 1. Thank you.